turn to our first slide. Well, welcome and thank you again for joining us tonight for this information session on Minnesota's Great Start Compensation Support Payments Program. I'm Deb Swenson-Klatt. I'm manager of the Child Development Services Unit in our Child Care Services Division at DHS. I apologize for the darkness of my video tonight. I can't seem to get it to be a little brighter, but we'll move forward and I'll continue to lead us through our first couple of slides. I'm sharing that this is the first information session for this new program. We're also offering similar sessions this week for licensed child care centers and certified child care centers. And tonight we have family child care providers gathered to learn more about this new program. And this is ahead of the program's launch in October, just a few weeks away. The last information sessions we held were in early June, when we shared information about the transition grants, and those grants have just concluded in the month of September. As with those information sessions in June, tonight's WebEx is being recorded and it will be posted on the DHS website for the Compensation Support Payment Program page, and that should show up. The recorded session should show up in the next few days. We'll send an email with that website link and encourage you to visit it soon to view a recording if you need to and for more information. Launching a brand new public program is a big undertaking, even when that program is similar to other recent programs. And so we are so thankful to the Minnesota legislature, the governor of Minnesota, and community leaders for their support in launching this new program. And more importantly, we are grateful to you, Minnesota's family child care providers. Thank you to those of you who sent questions ahead of this presentation. Almost 40 providers participated in engagement events with us in recent months. So we are deeply grateful for the time that those folks spent with us, the good and hard questions they asked, and great suggestions. And finally, thank you not only for taking time out of your evening after we know a busy day to learn about this new program, but also for the work you do each and every day to support families and children. And if you employ or have other early childhood educators in your family child care homes, we appreciate the support you provide to them. Before we go further, I'd like to invite my colleagues in DHS to say hello. Some of them will be presenting tonight. So Nolan, you've just popped on camera, so please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Deb. Hello, everyone. My name is Nolan Fine. I work on the Child Development Services team under Deb, and I help to administer the Great Start Compensation Support Payment Program.
Great. Jeff.
Yep, good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Smith. I'm project manager assisting with this initiative and a few others within DHS, and I'm happy to be with you tonight.
I know we have Jenny Moses from the Children's Cabinet on listening in, but not able to say hello via video. Cindy, do you want to say hello?
Hi, good evening. Cindy Yang, Director of Child Care Services Division at DHS. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Great. Thank you all. Nolan, Jeff, and I will be presenting tonight, and I'll head into the next few slides to share more information to begin sharing information about the program. So what are our goals for tonight's session? We are aiming to provide you with a wide range of information to help you prepare for the first application for the new Great Start Compensation Support Payment Program. Tonight, we're going to provide a program overview. We're going to talk about the similarities between this new program and the Child Care Stabilization Grant Program, and also the differences or the changes, knowing that so many providers are familiar with the old program. We thought it would be helpful to compare and contrast. We'll also talk about important program requirements, and in response to many of the questions providers sent to us ahead of this session, we'll talk through many of the common questions we received. Finally, we'll share some upcoming dates and help you to know where to go for more information. Because tonight's information session is conducted via WebEx, again, this session will be recorded. And because we have such a large number of participants, it looks like we might have about 250 or so providers on the call so far. We just needed to ask you to have your video off. Participants are muted, and we just invite you to sit back and listen, and keep in mind that if you have questions, you can of course return to the recorded video and or contact DHS or Child Care Aware of Minnesota for assistance. So, sharing some information about this new program's purpose. The Great Start Compensation Support Payment Program was signed into law in May of 2023, providing Minnesota with additional funds designed to support the childcare industry and early childhood educators. This is a nation-leading program that builds off the Child Care Stabilization Base Grants. And very much like that previous program, this new program will issue monthly payments to eligible childcare providers to support compensation and benefits. And for family childcare providers, we'll talk a little bit more about all of the allowable uses for the program. The Great Start Compensation Support payments start this month, October of 2023, and the application process will be similar to the stabilization base grants and the transition grants until it moves to the new provider hub at some point in 2024. This is a permanent new program, and although permanent, the legislature did appropriate some varying levels of funding for each year over the next 4 years. So beginning this year, state fiscal year 2024 through state fiscal year 2027, we have funding appropriated that changes from year to year. Like the stabilization base grants and the transition grants, the payment award amounts in this new program are determined by the number of full-time equivalent staff who regularly care for children. And the funding levels, because of the varying funding levels provided each year, that might mean that there will be some fluctuation in the per FTE amounts available that we use to calculate payments to providers. But having said that, our aim is going to be to have as little fluctuation year to year as possible so that you can count on a steady payment amount. We know that that's important. Providers have told us that it's helpful to plan, knowing how much the FTE per FTE amounts will be. As I said a few minutes ago, There are many program requirements and other aspects of the program that are similar to the stabilization-based grants, but there are some differences too. So let's turn to what is the same and what is different. Again, because we know there's wide familiarity with the child care stabilization grants, and because this new program is in many ways a continuation of the stabilization-based grants, we're sharing some of the information, about the program's key elements and requirements tonight by highlighting what is the same and different. So in terms of the program design, what is the same is that the applications and the application process is very similar. You can expect to receive individualized monthly applications through an email, and the funding period that you'll be applying for will be the previous month, and the hours per FTE that you'll be reporting to us will be for the previous month. Another program similarity is that providers must be open, operating, serving children, and in an eligible license status to receive funds. With respect to payments, here are some things that are similar. The payment amounts will continue to be based on the number of hours reported for early childhood educators. The hours that can be counted are only the hours directly caring for children. And another feature that's continuing is that providers who serve families receiving in the child care assistance program or families receiving early learning scholarships are eligible or will be provided a 10% increased payment. So a few slides here about what is different about this new program compared to the stabilization-based grants. So with respect to the program design, in the new program, different than the previous program, one early childhood educator can count for up to 2 full-time equivalent staff or full-time equivalent or FTEs. And different from the previous program, there is no requirement to, if possible, provide tuition or co-payment relief to families. When we think about or turn to legal non-licensed home-based providers, those providers were eligible for and received stabilization-based grants, but in this new program, they'll be receiving a different type of payment. So that point is, again, regarding legal non-licensed home-based providers, different than the group gathered, the home-based providers gathered here tonight who are licensed family child care providers. And finally, in this new program, no financial hardship grants are available. With respect to children, a key difference between this program and the previous program is that a provider must care for a minimum number of children in order to be eligible to receive payments. And providers must record and report child enrollment and daily attendance. Although this will not, we will not be asking providers to report this daily attendance data until the middle of next year, till the middle of 2024. We'll be talking more about many of these new provisions as we go forward in this information session tonight. I mentioned a few minutes ago that the 10% increased payment remains available in this new program. But there's a new twist. In addition to receiving a 10% increased payment, if you serve a family receiving child care assistance subsidies or early learning scholarships, the new program has another way in which providers can receive a 10% increased payment. This new addition is called Child Care Access Equity Areas. And what this refers to is a new mechanism or way of identifying areas of the state that are tied to census tract data that show that there are high numbers of families with inadequate access to childcare, where there is relatively high poverty or unemployment rates, and where there is relatively low home ownership rates and median household income. So childcare providers who are located in a childcare access equity area will be awarded this 10% bonus to their monthly compensation to support payment, again, regardless of if they serve children receiving childcare assistance payments, childcare assistance subsidies, or early learning scholarships. This feature is not fully developed and finalized, so it won't be rolling out in October, but it will be coming soon. And finally, with respect to reporting, there are some new changes here. Providers must complete an annual report describing how funds were used over the previous year. And for a short period of time between October 2023 and January 24, providers must complete the market rate survey in order to be eligible to receive these funds. So with that, oh, I'm sorry, one more important slide. Again, for what is different specifically for licensed family childcare providers compared to the stabilization-based grants, the list of allowable uses is a little different, and we will walk through that with you. And once a year, providers will be asked to share their operating expenses as a part of participating in the program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nolan to share more on some important requirements of the program.
Thanks, Deb. As mentioned, we'll now move on to some important requirements of the compensation support payments in more depth. These requirements are either new or changed from the child care stabilization grant requirements. These requirements are in the law that created the Great Start Compensation Support Payments Program and are intended to protect against fraud or misuse of funds for this program. These measures will ensure that the program can operate long-term with public confidence that the funds are being used as designed. You can see here the topics we'll cover. Important requirements are daily attendance, minimum number of children served, maximum number of vacation days, record keeping, and the annual report. We'll start by covering daily attendance requirements. So what are the daily attendance requirements? Providers must record and report daily attendance data, including a child's first and last names, the date, and the check-in and check-out times for that day. Why are daily attendance? Why are we requiring daily attendance to be tracked and reported? The law requires DHS to establish a minimum number of children served for provider eligibility. This is an important protection against fraud and misuse of funds, ensuring that child care programs are actually in operation and caring for real children. And how are daily attendance requirements being collected? Initially, attendance data requested in the application process will be limited. Full daily attendance records will need to be reported to DHS once the application moves into the provider hub, which will likely be in mid-2024. DHS is currently developing the method by which we will collect daily attendance records in the provider hub, and we'll keep you updated as we make progress on that piece. However, providers must be prepared to make available daily attendance record upon DHS's request at any time. So again, you'll need to start recording daily attendance records currently, but you will not need to submit those until likely mid-2024. So the question that will be asked in the October 2023 application in relation to daily attendance is on the screen here, and that is, what was your program's highest attendance on a single day during September 2023? Again, this is the question for the October Compensation Support Payment Program application, so that month will change with each round. So in the November application, it'll ask about October. In December, it'll ask about November, etc. This question will remain in the compensation support payment application until the submission of daily attendance records is required, which again is around mid-2024. You will also be asked about your program's enrollment in a more simplified way compared to transition grants and base grants. The new enrollment question is also here on this slide, and that is, what was your enrollment for each age group in a typical week from September 1 to September 30? Again, these dates are for the October compensation support application, and will change in line with the previous question in regards to the month. So this will just be asking for typical enrollment for infants, toddlers, preschool, and school age. And if you remember, previously we would ask for full-time and part-time for each of these categories. That has been simplified for just how many children in each one of these age groups. The law also requires that DHS establish a minimum number of children served as a provider eligibility criterion. Why is there a minimum attendance requirement? This is an important protection against fraud and misuse of funds, ensuring that a minimum level of service was provided in return for state funding. What is the minimum attendance requirement for family and child care providers? The minimum is 3 children. However, there are exceptions to the minimum attendance requirement of 3 children for family child care providers. Excuse me. Those exceptions include newly licensed programs that have been licensed within the past 6 months, or providers who have a B1, B2, or D class family child care provider license. And for those providers in these 2 situations, the minimum would be reduced from 3 to 2 children. So to dig a little bit further into the minimum attendance requirement, the minimum number of children must be in attendance on at least 5 days during the previous month. This previous month is the funding period for your application. Importantly, a provider's own children cannot count towards meeting the minimum attendance requirement. So what will this look like in the October 2023 compensation support payment application? The application will ask, how many days did you care for at least 3 children on a single day, not including your own children in the month of September 2023. So again, the application will ask how many days you served at least 3 children in the month of September. And again, this is an example. So the minimum of 3 children applies to most family child care providers. But again, if you were licensed within the last 6 months, newly licensed within the last 6 months, or if you had one of those special class licenses, that would be 2 children minimum for providers in those 2 categories. Again, this was just an example. And also this question, again, will remain in the application until we move the application to the provider hub and providers begin submitting their daily attendance records. All right, and I think with that, I will pass things off to Jeff.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to cover a few more topics here. The first one is related to the last topic, and it's related to the maximum number of vacation days, vacation or holidays. The law creating the program specifically instructs DHS to define a maximum allowed duration for vacations and holidays. And for consistency's sake, in an attempt to align with the minimum number of children and days of service that we just talked about, we're wanting to match those up. So the minimum number of days that a provider must care for children is 5 days. So the maximum allowed duration for vacations and holidays is 5 days less than the number of days in a month. So a little bit of word soup there. So let me talk through an example here. So if a provider typically works 20 days in a month, then they could take 15 days of vacation and or holidays if they provided care for 5 days and of course served the minimum number of children required. So as long as a provider cared for the minimum number of children for 5 days in a month, they could be on vacation or take holidays for the remainder of the month. Now, we know most people don't do that, but we also know that exceptional circumstances do have, and we wanted to provide some flexibility around that. So we've tried to, again, sync up those 2 items. So another really important piece that we touched on earlier is record keeping. So providers must document the following 3 things. The first one is how you're using the funds. And I will talk about that in just a little bit later in one of the next items. The second thing here is the daily attendance records must be completed every day, as Nolan and Deb have talked about already. The third item here is only relevant in a subset of situations. And so if a family childcare provider increases compensation or benefits for any employees that you may have or early childhood educators other than the license holder, in those instances, then you would also need to document that early childhood educator employment, compensation, and benefits. That would include timesheets, other records of daily hours worked, documentation of the compensation and benefits that were provided, and documentation of written changes to employees' rate or rates of pay and the basis thereof as a result of those payments. So again, the requirement to document these things is only necessary if you are using some of the funds to increase the compensation of any employees that you may have. The next item we're going to talk briefly about is the annual report that was mentioned earlier. The way this annual report will work is that all providers of all provider types are going to be asked to complete a brief annual report 12 months after they receive their first compensation support payment and their application. So it's going to focus primarily on collecting information about how the payment funds were spent. This report is still just being developed because it is so far out into the future. We don't have a tremendous amount of details yet, We will, of course, share more details as this report is defined and built out. We will have a webinar to talk about it again. There will be lots of content on the web pages for the program. But just keep in mind that this is something that will be coming in the future. One of the things we're changing in the application to actually simplify the monthly application is removing the question that we've asked every month about how the funds you've been receiving have been spent or you're planning to spend them, and move that to just this annual report that will occur once a year instead. So this is an attempt to simplify it and consolidate that effort a little bit. So next, we're going to jump into some common questions that we received over the course of the past week or so, since we sent out an invitation for some questions. Nolan and I are going to cover these together. So the first question that we receive pretty frequently is, do we need to record exact sign-in and sign-out times for children's attendance? And Nolan, what's the answer to that question?
Providers are expected to be as accurate as possible. However, DHS realizes this is a lot to manage for family child care providers and watching children, and also checking in and checking out children as they arrive or depart. So we don't expect perfection.
Great. So the next question that I'm sure everyone is interested in is, what is the dollars per FTE or the payment basis going to be for October?
DHS is still finalizing the October 2023 amount per full-time equivalent, but it is expected to be between $365 and $375.
Great. And then, will the payment amounts be consistent in the future? I know Deb mentioned something about this at the very beginning.
DHS's goal is to keep the amount per full-time equivalent payment consistent through October through June 2024, at which time the department will reevaluate the funding amount based on participation in the program.
Great. And then Deb mentioned something at the very beginning about the program being permanent. What does that mean exactly?
Permanent means that the law that created the program did not establish an end date for this program. So the program will continue unless future legislation is passed that removes this program or changes it in some way.
All right, that's good news. And then one question we got quite a bit, especially in context of some discussions that have started around the Provider Hub and this attendance tracking requirement, is, will there be funding available for technology upgrades to assist with daily attendance tracking?
There are 3 opportunities or current or future programs that providers can take advantage of that could assist in providers acquiring funds to upgrade their technology. The first option is not yet out, but should be coming soon. That is called the Child Care Provider Technology Grants, and that will be administered by DHS. So we will keep everyone informed of the rollout of that program. Another program is the Parent Aware Quality Improvement Grants, which is a collection of a few grants that providers can learn more about through the Child Care Aware website. And the last option is Regional Child Care Aware Grants, which is another type of grant that you can learn more about on the Child Care Aware website. But all 3 of these options will provide funding to purchase new technology to assist with things like daily attendance tracking.
Great. And then at least one more question here. We've talked a lot about attendance, but does attendance affect the award amounts that providers might receive?
No, attendance affects whether a provider is eligible for payment, but it does not affect the payment amount.
And that payment amount will still be based the same way it has been on the number of hours that a provider works during the month, right?
Correct.
Great. So that brings us to some important and exciting dates. So this compensation support payment application, this first one for October, will open on Monday, October 16th. That's a week and almost 2 weeks away, on just under. The application is going to be open for 10 days, which is 2 days longer than we've typically had the base grant and the transition grant applications open for. And so it'll close on October 25th. This is one of the pieces of feedback we received as we talked to some providers, is they'd love to see a slightly longer application period, especially for this first month with some changes coming. The other thing we're going to do on an ongoing basis is just slightly extend the closing time for the application each month. We're going to move it from 4 o'clock to 4:30 to give just a little bit more time for providers to get that application submitted. Now, as always, though, we strongly encourage providers to apply at the beginning of the application period. And family childcare providers historically do the best job of this, of applying at the beginning of the application period, which then prevents, any surprises, technology issues, or other things that may happen on that last day of the application period from preventing you from getting your application in on time. So please do apply early, and that is the safest way to go, certainly. This last bullet notes that we're going to continue to target the opening of the application on the 15th of each month, except in the instances like this month in October, when the 15th lands on a weekend or a holiday. So then we always are typically going to push it to the next business day. So you can put an appointment on your calendar to know that it's going to open on the 15th. I think the next month that it wouldn't land on the 15th is like May or June of next year. So a long ways down the road. The 15th is a good date to just bank on and know that the application is going to open on that day. So the other thing we wanted to make sure that we made everyone aware of is the compensation support payment website is under development, but is growing like literally today and in the next couple of days here. So we made a huge update to the website today. We're going to make another one, I believe, tomorrow, when we add the frequently asked questions. But it's going to contain information about eligibility, about award amounts, the application periods and the process, the requirements, and allowable uses of funds in addition to the frequently asked questions. We will be sending out an email to providers with the link to that once everything is out and updated. We will also be posting this PowerPoint presentation on that website until we can get the recording processed and posted. That typically takes about a week. So if there's anything in this you want to rewatch, do look for that in about a week. But before then, we'll post this PowerPoint presentation so you can look at the content of it. And then finally, thank you for everyone who's joined tonight. We have a great turnout. I saw at least over 300 people joined at various points during the evening. We know, again, as Deb mentioned at the top, right, you got through a long day, and so attending tonight is really appreciated, and we're glad to be able to share this content with you in advance, well in advance of the application opening in October. If you do have questions, comments, suggestions, please do email them to either or both of the email addresses on the slide here. So supportfunds@childcareawaremn.org or compensationsupport.dhs@state.mn.us. We are constantly monitoring both of those, evaluating the information that's coming, and then making adjustments as needed and adjusting our communication as needed as well. So with that, I'll hand things maybe back to Deb to close us out.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff and Nolan. And thank you again for joining us tonight. I'll just note or provide an acknowledgement that there is a lot coming at Minnesota's family child care providers and child care centers as well. The Provider Hub, the continuous license for family child care providers, the licensing modernization effort to update or again modernize licensing statute, and this new program and more. So much passed as a result of the 2023 legislative session or was underway even prior. So we understand that there's a lot to keep track of, and that many things are coming at you, our family child care provider community, at the same time. So all of these things are indeed intended to be efforts to strengthen the family child care provider community industry. And we are just committed to communicating fully and as often as we can, and providing technical assistance to you along the way. So thank you again, and we wish you a great evening. Good night, everyone.